During that fateful dinner, my daughter-in-law screamed, "Either you give your room to my parents or you pack your things and leave." I did not argue. I did not beg. I simply left. 1 week later, I was waving from my office window directly across the street from her house. That was just the beginning of my revenge. Before I continue, please subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and write in the comments what time it is where you are right now. The silence in the dining room felt deliberate. I noticed it the moment I walked through the front door that February afternoon. That kind of stillness that comes from people choosing not to speak rather than having nothing to say. Grace had her back to me when I entered. She moved between the kitchen and the dining table with exaggerated concentration, placing plates and silverware with the precision of someone performing for an audience. 6 place settings. I counted them twice. "Good evening, Grace," I said. She adjusted a fork. She straightened a napkin. Her shoulders tensed, but she did not turn around. I hung my coat by the door and walked into the dining room. David was already sitting at the table, staring at something invisible on his empty plate. My son looked up briefly when I entered. He managed a half smile, then looked back down. "David." I pulled out the chair opposite him. "Hello." "Dad." His voice barely crossed the table. Grace walked past me, carrying a serving platter. Close enough to smell her perfume, but far enough to make the distance intentional. She set the platter down with more force than necessary. "Dinner is almost ready," she announced to the room. Not to me. To the room. I had lived in that house for 3 years, in the small bedroom off the first-floor hallway. 3 years navigating Grace's moods, learning when to speak and when silence was more convenient. Tonight felt different. The air was heavy. The doorbell rang. Grace's face transformed. The tight line of her mouth curved into a bright smile as she ran to open it. I heard voices in the entryway. Cheerful, loud, and familiar. "We have arrived," a man's voice boomed down the hall. "What a lovely house, you have a woman's voice." Cloying with enthusiasm. Charles and Linda appeared in the dining room doorway, dragging rolling suitcases. Grace's parents. I did not know they were coming. Charles was a large man with thinning hair and the confident posture of someone used to being welcomed. Linda matched him in volume, if not in size, with arms already outstretched toward Grace for a hug. "I hope you do not mind us just showing up like this." Charles let go of his suitcase handle and clapped his hands. Grace said it would not be a problem for a couple of weeks. "A couple of weeks?" I looked at David. He was studying his plate with intense concentration, as if the china pattern held the answers to questions he could not ask aloud. "Of course not, Daddy." Grace kissed her father's cheek and then her mother's. "We are so happy to have you." Linda settled into a chair, smoothing her dress. The guest room at the Millers was simply impossible. "That mattress, Charles, do you remember?" "Terrible," agreed Charles, taking the seat at the head of the table, the seat David usually occupied. David did not protest. We told them we would find another arrangement. Another arrangement. I watched Grace move around the table, serving her parents first, then David, and then herself. My plate remained empty. "Arthur, pass the potatoes when you are done," said Grace without looking at me. I had not taken any yet. The platter was in the center of the table within her reach. We ate in fractured conversation. Charles dominated, telling stories about his bridge club and a dispute with his homeowners association. Linda enhanced his narrative with affirmations and extra details. Grace laughed at the appropriate moments, asked follow-up questions, and played the role of the attentive daughter. David and I were spectators. I finished the food on my plate, although I could not have said what it tasted like. Tension coiled in my chest, making it hard to swallow. Grace stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She crossed her arms and turned to look directly at me for the first time that night. "Arthur, my parents need a proper room." Her voice had the sharp edge of an announcement, not a request. "That room on the first floor is perfect for them." "The room on the first floor, my room. Grace, that is where I live." I kept my voice level. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Either you give your room to my parents, or you pack your things." The words cut through the rest of the dinner conversation. Charles shifted in his chair. Linda looked at her daughter with something resembling pride. David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Son." I turned to him. David set the fork down with careful precision. His eyes met mine for a split second before darting away. "Maybe we can find a solution." "We already found it." Grace's voice rose. "My parents need that room. It has its own bathroom. It is on the first floor." "My mother's knees, Arthur. She cannot be climbing stairs all day." "There is a guest room upstairs," I said, with a bathroom down the hall. Grace slammed her palm on the table. The silverware jumped. My parents are not going to wander down the hall in their pajamas. They deserve better than that. I looked at David again. My son, whom I had raised, whom I had helped in ways Grace did not even know. Now he examined his hands, turning them over as if discovering them for the first time. David, I said his name softly. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He swallowed. Grace filled the silence. This is my house too, Arthur. In fact, it is more mine than. She stopped, but the implication hung between us. I stood up. The scrape of my chair was the loudest sound in the sudden silence that followed. I see, I said. Excuse me. My legs carried me steady and sure down the hall to my room. Behind me I heard Grace's voice ring out with unmistakable triumph. Finally, some cooperation. I closed the door behind me and stood in the center of the small space. The room contained my life in miniature: a bed, a dresser, a reading chair by the window, books on the nightstand, a framed photograph of my late wife on the dresser. Emily. She had been gone 5 years. I opened the closet and pulled down my suitcase. The leather was worn and soft from years of business travel. When I worked as a financial advisor, when I had my own house, my own space, my own life, I put the suitcase on the bed and began to pack. No frenzy, no anger or grief clouding my movements. Every garment I folded with precise care. Shirts, pants, socks rolled into neat pairs. I organized my toiletries in a travel kit. I wrapped my razor in a cloth. I secured the caps on cologne bottles and medications. Through the door I could hear them. The voices of Grace's parents drifted down the hall, cheerful and oblivious. This room will be perfect, Charles. Linda's voice carried clearly. Much better than that awful guest room at the Millers. Grace always takes care of us, Charles replied. I paused, a sweater in my hands. Something cold and clear settled in my chest. It was not anger. Anger burned hot and fast. It consumed itself in flames. This was different. This was ice forming over deep water, solid, unbreakable. Something useful. I continued packing. The suitcase clicked shut. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hand still resting on the handle. The sounds of celebration filtered through the door. Laughter. Footsteps. The dragging of furniture being mentally rearranged. My room. It was already theirs. I do not know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light through the window to deepen from gray to charcoal. Long enough for the voices outside my door to fade into distant murmurs. Long enough for the memories to surface one after another with the clarity of photographs developing in solution. 4 years ago, almost exactly 4 years ago, I remembered David's face when he called me, the tremor in his voice as he explained about the foreclosure notice. The bank had started the process. They were going to lose the house. Grace is hysterical, he had said. I do not know what to do. I drove over there that same night. I sat at this same dining table while David spread the papers in front of me. Stamped documents with deadlines and legal terminology. $180,000 to clear the mortgage entirely. I cannot ask you to do this. Dad, David had said, but his eyes held desperate hope. I wrote the check the next morning. I took it to the bank myself. I watched the balance transfer from my account to theirs, erasing years of missed payments and accumulated debt in a single transaction. David had wept, literally wept, standing in the bank parking lot, gripping my shoulder. I will pay you back, I swear, Dad. Every cent. I told him not to worry about it. Family helps family. But there had been more, hadn't there? Memories came faster now. A cascade of dates and amounts that my financial mind had catalogued automatically, even while I tried to frame them as gifts rather than debts. $15,000 for their wedding. Grace had wanted the reception at that resort in the mountains, the one with views of the red rocks and the premium bar service. David's salary could not cover it. I covered it. $8,000 for Grace's car when the transmission on her old sedan died. She wanted the newer model, the one with leather seats and the upgraded sound system. I arranged the purchase, $1,200 a month for the last 3 years, just to help with expenses, Dad David had said, groceries, utilities, insurance, the monthly costs that ate into paychecks. I had set up an automatic transfer. I did not even think about it anymore. The money just flowed from my account to theirs, constant as a river. I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I scrolled through months, then years of transaction history. There they were. Neat rows of transfers, each labeled with David's name. The evidence of my generosity documented with digital precision. I set the phone carefully on the bed beside me. Through the door, Linda's voice came clearly. "We will have to get different curtains, Charles. These are too dark. Maybe something in a nice cream color." "Whatever you want, dear." Charles's response was indulgent, comfortable. They were measuring my room for their furniture, planning their curtains, settling in. I stood up. I lifted my suitcase off the bed. The weight was manageable. I had always lived simply, despite the money Emily and I had accumulated during our years together. The $2.8 million in investment accounts, the paid-off properties, the comfortable retirement I had planned. I had sold my own house 3 years ago. When Emily died, the place felt too big, too full of her absence. David had suggested I move in with them, just until you decide what to do, Dad, and I had agreed, thinking temporary would become comfortable. Thinking family meant safety. I had been wrong. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway stretched before me, familiar and strange at once. I walked toward the front door, suitcase in hand, my steps steady on the hardwood floor I had helped refinish last summer. David appeared from the kitchen, materializing in front of me with the sudden awkwardness of someone who had been waiting, just out of sight. "Dad!" His voice cracked slightly. Maybe we can find a solution. You could take the guest room upstairs and—" "It is okay, son." I looked him straight in the eye. I let him see whatever expression was on my face. I felt calm, distant, clear. I will take care of myself. I did not know she was going to. He reached a hand toward me, then pulled it back. "It is just for a couple of weeks. They will go home." And then from the kitchen, Grace's voice called out with casual indifference. "Tell him there is dinner in the fridge if he wants it." No goodbye. No acknowledgement that I was leaving with a suitcase in my hand, that something fundamental had just fractured. David's hand dropped to his side. I walked past him. I opened the front door. I stepped out into the February night. The cold hit my face, sharp and clarifying. I stood under the porch light, my breath forming clouds in the air, and I took out my phone to call a taxi. The driver arrived in 15 minutes. A younger man, 30s, baseball cap and a friendly enough demeanor. "Where to, boss?" he asked as I settled into the back seat. "The downtown hotel." He pulled away from the curb. I watched the house recede in the side mirror, warm lights in the windows, the home I had helped save, the family I had supported. "Moving out?" the driver asked, watching me in the rearview mirror. "Yes. Tough day." I considered the question, clarifying. He did not push for more details, and I was grateful. We drove in silence through streets I knew well, past the park where I had pushed David on the swings 30 years ago, past the corner store where Emily and I used to buy Sunday papers. The hotel lobby was generic in its comfort. Neutral carpet, bland artwork, the kind of space designed not to offend. I checked in quickly, taking the room key from the clerk, who asked no questions and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The room was clean and impersonal, standard hotel setup, a bed with a green duvet, a desk, a wall-mounted TV, a bathroom with miniature toiletries. I put my suitcase on the rack and sat on the edge of the bed. The mirror opposite reflected my image. A 67-year-old man in dress slacks and a button-down shirt, still composed, still upright. I looked the same as I had this morning, but something had shifted beneath the surface. I thought about David's face as I walked past him. The guilt there, yes, but also the relief. Relief that I had made it easy, that I had gone quietly, that he had not been forced to confront his wife. I thought about Grace's triumphant voice. Finally, some cooperation, as if my submission was the natural order of things, as if I were an inconvenience to be managed, instead of the man who had saved their home, funded their wedding, sustained their lifestyle for years. I thought about Grace's parents, already discussing curtains in my bedroom, already comfortable in the space I had occupied for 3 years. The hotel air conditioner hummed, a steady white noise. I lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, hands folded on my chest. The ceiling had that popcorn texture hotels seem to favor. I studied the little bumps in the dim light of the bedside lamp. I gave them everything. Then, the house, the wedding, the car, the monthly checks. And tonight they gave me clarity. It was time to act. My phone read 11:47 p.m. Somewhere across town, Grace's parents were settling into my old room, and David lay next to Grace, probably staring at the ceiling as much as I was. But where his thoughts circled with guilt and avoidance, mine had sharpened. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. The next morning, I ordered coffee in the lobby and spread my documents across the hotel desk. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the AC and the occasional sound of footsteps in the hall. I had packed more than just clothes. The habit of 40 years as a financial advisor had taught me to keep my critical records organized and accessible. I spent that week doing what I do best, analyzing assets, calculating risks, planning strategies. My leather-bound notebook lay open next to my laptop, the same notebook I had kept since 1985, pages of handwritten figures, account numbers, property addresses. I had always preferred writing the important numbers by hand. It forced me to pay careful attention, made them concrete instead of digital abstractions. First, I documented everything systematically. Retirement savings, $520,000 across 3 accounts. Investment portfolio, $890,000 in a diversified mix of stocks and bonds, carefully balanced for my age and risk tolerance. Certificates of deposit and treasury bonds, $340,000, safe and predictable. Then the properties, 2 rental units in the neighboring town, bought 20 years ago when the market had dipped. I had renovated both myself initially, replacing faucets and floors, learning plumbing and electrical from manuals and patient contractors. Current combined value, $580,000, generating $3,400 monthly. Almost no effort on my part. Good tenants, steady income, liquid cash. Checking and savings accounts, $470,000. I wrote the total at the bottom of the page. I circled it twice. $2.8 million. My pension added $4,200 monthly. Combined with the rental income, it totaled $7,600 every single month without touching the principal. I sat back, pen still in hand, and studied the figures. 40 years of careful investment, 40 years of building security. Emily and I had been prudent, strategic. We had retired comfortably, traveled modestly, lived well without extravagance. And David had assumed I was just another old man living on Social Security, grateful for a room in his house. My phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen. I watched it vibrate against the wooden desk. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared. I played it on speaker while I continued working. "Dad, it is me." His voice hesitated. "Look, Grace was stressed about her parents. Maybe we overreacted. Call me." "Yeah." I deleted it without replying. On the 3rd day of my stay, I drove to the neighboring town. The route was familiar. 30 minutes through city traffic, past strip malls and subdivisions to the area where my properties sat on adjacent lots. The first tenant, Mark, was washing his car in the driveway when I pulled up. He straightened when he saw me, smiled with genuine warmth. "Mr. Arthur." He set down the sponge. "Haven't seen you in months. Everything okay? Just stopping by to check." I walked closer, scanning the exterior paint. "The condition of the roof. How is the water heater?" "Perfect since you replaced it last year." Mark wiped his hands on his jeans. "You didn't need to drive all the way out here. I would have called if anything was wrong." "I know. Wanted to see the place anyway." I inspected both units thoroughly, walking through the interiors with my tenant's permission, checking faucets and window seals, testing light switches. The properties were solid, well-maintained, requires minimal management, and generating steady income. Back at the hotel that night, I sat at the desk with my calculator running scenarios: what could be liquidated quickly if necessary, what should remain invested, what I could afford for my plan. The clarity I had felt lying in bed that first night was sharpening with every passing day. I created a spreadsheet, something I hadn't needed to do in years, but the skill returned easily. Every dollar I had given, David and Grace documented with dates and purposes. The mortgage payoff, $180,000. The wedding, $15,000. The car, $8,000. 36 monthly payments of $1,200 over 3 years, $43,200 total transferred. $246,200. $250,000 given freely to family. I had trusted to a son who had stayed silent while his wife demanded. I leave to a daughter-in-law who had told me to pack my things with triumph in her voice. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The parking lot stretched below cars, arranged in neat rows under the streetlights. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, probably unaware that somewhere among them sat a man planning an elegant revenge. Thursday afternoon, the bank called me back. Mr. Arthur, the representative's voice was professional, slightly concerned. I have reviewed your request. Moving this amount of cash will take a few days. Is everything all right? Everything is fine. I kept my voice steady, pleasant. I am making an investment. How quickly can you process it? 3 to 5 business days for the full amount. May I ask what kind of investment? Real estate. Ah, relief colored her tone. Real estate was respectable, sensible. We can expedite that if necessary. You have been a valued client for many years. The standard time frame is acceptable. By the end of the week, I was sitting in the hotel room with a legal pad full of notes, not furious scribbles, calm strategic planning, lists of requirements, cost calculations, execution timelines. I had learned something important during those 7 days. The anger I had felt that first night, the cold clarity, it had matured into something more refined, more useful. I did not want to hurt them. I wanted them to see, to understand what they had thrown away, to recognize their mistake with absolute and unavoidable precision. The first step crystallized. Show them I was not a helpless old man they could discard. Show them I had resources they had never imagined. Show them consequences. I stood by the window looking in the direction of the street where they lived, even though I could not see it from here. Somewhere across town in the house I had saved from foreclosure, Grace's parents were sleeping in my old room. David lay next to his wife, probably feeling guilty but doing nothing about it. I turned back to the desk. I picked up my notebook. I checked the circled figure one last time. The house across the street had been for sale for 3 weeks. I had noted the sign during the years I lived there, watching it weather the rain and sun, waiting for the right buyer. I knew exactly where to start. I checked out of the hotel the next morning and drove the familiar route toward the subdivision. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Mature trees lining the streets, houses set back from the road with front yards landscaped with desert plants and decorative rocks. I knew every curve, every intersection. The street appeared ahead. I slowed down. I let a pickup truck pass and then continued at a casual pace. David's house was on the left side of the street, Grace's white sedan visible in the driveway. Lights on in the kitchen. Someone was home. I did not stop. I did not slow down further. Just maintained a steady speed like any other passing driver. But I saw it. Directly across from their house, the wooden sign with burgundy lettering. For sale. Sun Valley Real Estate. I had noticed that sign before, in passing, during the years I lived there. Never paid it special attention. Now it seemed to glow with possibility. I parked 3 houses down. I took out my phone and photographed the sign. I zoomed in on the phone number. Entered it into my contacts immediately. Through my windshield I could see both houses. David's on the left, the house I had saved, the house where I had lived in a small first-floor room, where I had eaten at that table, where I had been discarded like outdated furniture. The house opposite on the right, larger 2 stories, 1960s construction with a wide front porch and a mature garden that needed pruning. The paint on the window frames was fading slightly. Structurally sound, but cosmetically neglected. The distance between them, maybe 30 yards. I dialed the number. Sun Valley Real Estate. How can I help you? A woman's voice, pleasant and professional. I am interested in the property on that street. Is it still available? Yes, sir. Let me connect you with Margaret Fields, the listing agent. A brief pause, then a different voice. This is Margaret. Miss Fields, my name is Arthur. I'm interested in viewing the property on that street. Is it still on the market? It is. She sounded genuinely pleased. It is available this afternoon. I can meet you there at 2. 2 works perfectly. I spent the intervening hours in a coffee shop on the main avenue reviewing property records on my phone. The house was listed at $685,000. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2,400 square feet. Built in 1967. Owned by the Carsons, who were relocating to another region for work. At 1:45, I drove back to the street and parked in front of the house. A silver Lexus pulled in behind me exactly at 2. A woman emerged mid-50s, professional dress, confident stride. Mr. Arthur, she extended her hand. I am Margaret. Thank you for meeting on such short notice. Her handshake was firm. She carried a leather folder and keys, moving with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. I appreciate your flexibility. I gestured toward the house. I am looking for something specific. Let's see if this fits. She unlocked the front door and stepped aside to let me enter first. The interior smelled faintly of vacancy, that particular scent of a house waiting between occupants. Hardwood floors in the entry, slightly pinkish but salvageable. Living room to the left with a brick fireplace. Dining room to the right. The owners kept it well, Margaret said, walking ahead of me. Raised 3 kids here. Needs cosmetic updates, but the bones are excellent. I followed her through the layout. Kitchen with original cabinets, dated but functional. A family room overlooking the backyard. Upstairs bedrooms with decent-sized closets. Bathrooms with tile that screamed 1980s renovation. Then she showed me the front room. This was a den or sitting room for the previous owners. Margaret opened the door, revealing a space roughly 15 by 12 feet. Built-in shelves along one wall. Hardwood flooring. And along the front wall, a picture window that spanned almost the entire width of the room. I walked straight to that window. Through the glass, I had an unobstructed view of David and Grace's house, their living room window clearly visible, the kitchen beyond, even the hallway that led to the first-floor bedroom. My old room. I stood there, hands in my pockets, and felt something click into place. The final piece. The perfect irony. Wonderful natural light, Margaret said behind me. The view is interesting. I kept my voice carefully casual. What is the setback between houses here? About 30 yards. It is a friendly neighborhood. People know each other. I turned to examine the built-ins, running my hand along the wood. Are these original to the house? From 1967? Yes. Solid construction. I walked to the other side of the room, mentally measuring where I would place a desk, directly facing that window, looking out. Positioned so that anyone sitting there looked straight into David's house. Are the owners motivated to sell quickly? I asked. Margaret's professional demeanor sharpened slightly. The tone of someone recognizing a serious buyer. They are relocating for work. Would they prefer a quick close? Can I make a cash offer? I looked her in the eye. How fast could we close? Her eyebrows rose just a fraction before she controlled the expression. With cash, 2 weeks. Possibly 10 days if inspections clear. And the asking price, $685. But the Carsons are reasonable people. They want to move on, not chase another $20,000. I nodded slowly, as if considering, even though I had already decided. I will have to think about the offer amount, but the location works for me. We toured the rest of the house. I made appropriate observations about plumbing and electrical, asked about the age of the roof, examined the garage, professional questions from someone who knew what to look for. Back in the front room, I paused at the window again. Margaret gave me space, standing in the doorway, letting me have the moment. Through the window, a figure moved in David's kitchen, Grace carrying something from the fridge to the counter. She was laughing, head thrown back, talking to someone out of sight. Do you have family in the area, Mr. Arthur? Margaret asked quietly. I turned to look at her. My son lives nearby. It is part of the appeal. Something flickered in her expression. She had heard something in my tone. Some edge I hadn't quite controlled, but she was too professional to pry. It is a good neighborhood for family, she said simply. We walked back through the house to the front door. Margaret handed me her business card along with a detailed property info sheet. Call me if you have questions. Anytime. I stood on the porch after she left, looking at the house, then across the street at David's house. The distance was perfect. The angle was perfect. The symbolism was perfect. I walked back to my car. I started the engine, but didn't leave immediately. Instead, I sat there, hands on the wheel, looking at both houses. The house where I had been discarded. The house where I would establish my new position. My phone buzzed. Another text from David. Dad, please call me. I silenced the notification and pulled away from the curb. Already planning my next call to Margaret Fields. I dialed Margaret. I will take it. Let's write up an offer. She studied my face for a moment, perhaps looking for hesitation she wouldn't find. What number did you have in mind? 650,000. Cash. 10-day close. Her eyebrows went up. That is 35,000 under asking and cash with minimal contingencies. The Carsons want to move on. So do I. We met in her office the next morning. The space was professional. Glass desk. Abstract art on cream walls. The faint scent of vanilla from a diffuser. Margaret spread the purchase agreement across the desk, explaining each section with practiced efficiency. I signed where she indicated, my hand steady on the pen. When I wrote the earnest money check, $50,000. Margaret watched without comment, but I saw her register the ease with which I did it. No hesitation, no phone calls to verify funds, just a number written in my careful script. I will present this immediately, she said, given your timeline. I expect to hear back soon. She called 3 hours later. I was reviewing investment statements in my hotel room when my phone rang. Mr. Arthur. Her voice carried genuine excitement. They accepted. Full terms. 10-day close. I have rarely seen sellers so motivated. Excellent. I set down my pen. Send me the paperwork. I will have my bank ready. I will email everything within the hour. The process moved faster than even Margaret expected. The home inspection happened 2 days later. A thorough man in his 50s who walked the house with a clipboard and thermal camera documenting minor issues. Typical for a house built in 1967. Solid foundation, he said, making notes in the kitchen. Some cosmetic issues, typical wear and tear. Do you plan to flip it? No. I plan to stay. I followed him to the front room. How is the window integrity in that office? He examined the picture window, running a hand along the frame. These windows are the newest thing in the house. Replaced maybe 5 years ago. Double pane, energy efficient, excellent condition. I nodded, satisfied. The view would remain unobstructed. While escrow processed, I hired a renovation crew. The foreman met me at the property on a Tuesday afternoon. A stocky man named Carlos with 20 years of experience and a reputation for quality work delivered fast. You want all this done in 5 days? He reviewed my list. Fresh paint throughout. Floors refinished. Fixtures updated. New hardware in bathrooms. I am paying premium rates for speed. Can you do it? Carlos calculated mentally, his lips moving slightly. We will need 2 crews. It will cost extra. Fine. The office is the priority. I walked him to the front room. I pointed to the window. Charcoal gray walls here. Professional, not residential. I want the built-ins restored. And I need furniture. Oak desk. Leather chair. Proper lighting. You want it to look like an executive suite. Exactly that. He quoted $28,000 for the full job. I accepted without negotiating. Over the next week I visited the house daily, watching the crews transform the dated interiors into clean, modern spaces. Neutral tones in the bedrooms and living areas. Hardwood floors stripped and stained back to a rich honey color. The office received special attention. The charcoal walls created depth, making the picture window the focal point of the room. The restored shelves gleamed with fresh polyurethane. The oak desk arrived on day 4. Solid construction. Traditional design, large enough to work comfortably. Carlos's team positioned it where I directed. 3 feet back from the window, I said. Angled slightly left. Perfect. March 25th arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Margaret met me at her office for the final signing. More documents. More signatures. The exchange of keys across the desk. Congratulations, Mr. Arthur. She handed me the keys. 2 brass copies on a simple ring. Welcome to the neighborhood. Again. I accepted them with a slight smile. Thank you, Margaret. You have been very professional. She hesitated, then asked, if you don't mind me asking why this house specifically? The location. I looked her straight in the eye, and the view, understanding, flashed across her face, though she didn't press further. We shook hands and I drove straight to the street. The house felt different with possession. Mine now. Every room, every window, every sightline carefully planned. I walked through it slowly, running my hand along walls, testing light switches, confirming the work was completed to my specifications. In the office, I stood by the window. Across the street, David's house looked exactly the same as always. Grace's car in the driveway. Curtains open in the living room. My old room visible on the ground floor. Her parents' room now. 30 yards. Close enough to see clearly. Close enough to be seen. The move took 1 hour. I had lived modestly for 3 years. Everything I owned fit in my car. A suitcase of clothes. A box of books. My laptop and files. The furniture delivery brought the rest. The leather chair for the office. A bed frame and mattress. Kitchen essentials. I placed everything myself, particular about the positioning. The desk was exactly where I wanted it, angled for optimal viewing. The chair, buttery leather, ergonomically designed, faced the window. My laptop on the left side of the desk, files and legal pads on the right. I sat down, testing the setup. Perfect. Through the window, I had unobstructed visibility of David's living room, kitchen, and hallway. I pulled out my phone and typed a text to David. Moved into a new house. If you need me, I am nearby. Sent. The message showed as delivered immediately. Then 30 seconds later, read. I waited. No reply. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. The afternoon light streamed through the window, warming the oak desk. Across the street, I could see movement in their kitchen, someone walking past, though I couldn't make out who. I opened a manila folder, began reviewing the documents I had organized during my hotel stay. Financial records, property deeds, loan documentation, a timeline I had built of every dollar transferred to David and Grace over the years. Phase 1 complete. The house was purchased. The position established. The stage set. Now they would see. I looked up from my documents, glanced across the street again. The kitchen light had come on. Evening approaching. Someone was making dinner. Life continuing normally in the house I had saved. Among the family that had discarded me, I turned back to my files, pen in hand, making notes in the margins. Strategic planning, methodical and precise. The work I had spent 40 years perfecting, now applied to a different kind of investment, one with a very specific return. The next morning I brewed coffee in my new kitchen and carried the mug to my office. Sunrise filled the room with pale golden light. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began checking emails. Across the street, the house remained dark, early still. Not yet 7:30. I reviewed investment portfolios, responded to an old colleague about a consulting gig, organized files on my desktop. At 8, 15 lights flickered on in their living room. I continued working, attention on my screen but peripherally aware of movement across the street. Someone approaching their window, a figure in a robe, carrying something. Grace, coffee mug halfway to her lips. She froze. I saw her recognize me. Saw the exact moment comprehension hit her. The coffee mug stopped moving. Her body went rigid, shoulders pulled back. She stared straight at me through both windows. Through 30 yards of morning air, I set down my pen, made deliberate eye contact, raised my hand in a slow, measured wave. Friendly, calm, absolutely in control. Grace recoiled sharply. Coffee sloshed from her mug. I could see the dark liquid arc through the air, splattering her robe and the floor. Her mouth opened. She scrambled away from the window, disappeared from view. Seconds later, David appeared, still in pajamas, hair messy. Grace pulled him to the window, pointing across the street. I could see her speaking rapidly, gesturing. David stared. His face registered confusion, then recognition, then something more complex. Uncertainty mixed with what might have been guilt. I waved again, the same measured gesture. David's hand lifted automatically, a half-hearted, awkward wave back. Before Grace slapped his arm down even from 30 yards, I could see her fury, shaking her head, hands moving in sharp, angry gestures. I turned back to my laptop, resumed typing. Let them process it. Let them react. My phone rang 15 minutes later. David's name on the screen. I declined the call. Immediately a text appeared. Dad, what are you doing? I typed my reply. Busy. Talk later. Sent. Through the window I saw David look at his phone, show the screen to Grace. Her reaction was visible even from here. Pacing, gesturing wildly. Phone clutched in one hand. I took a sip of my coffee and opened a financial spreadsheet. All morning Grace returned to the window repeatedly. Every time I was there, working on my computer, reviewing documents, taking notes. Every time she appeared, I acknowledged her with a brief wave or nod, before returning to my work, not hiding, not ashamed, fully present. Around 10 o'clock, Charles and Linda joined them at the window. Charles's bulky frame, Linda beside him, all four of them staring across the street at me. A family conference visible through glass. I finished an email, sent it, and waved to the entire group. Charles was the first to turn away, then Linda, but Grace remained, gripping the curtain, watching. Lunch came and went. I ate a sandwich at my desk, worked through the afternoon, occasionally looking up to catch Grace at her window, sometimes alone, sometimes with David hovering behind her. The psychological impact was exactly what I had calculated. My presence, constant, calm, unexplained. It created pressure. They couldn't ignore me. They couldn't confront me without accepting what my presence meant. I was no longer the dispossessed father, living in their small first-floor room, grateful for space in their house. I was a man with resources, with property, with position, and I was watching. Evening approached. I turned on my office lamp as shadows lengthened. Across the street their windows glowed warm. I could see them moving through rooms. Grace in the kitchen, David passing through the hall. Grace's parents settled in the living room. My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts. After that morning exchange, I pulled out a document I had prepared, a detailed accounting of every financial transaction between David and me. Dates, amounts, purposes, $246,200, itemized with the precision of an audit. Through the window I saw Grace return to her post. She stood there backlit by the interior lights, staring across at me. I looked up from my document, met her eyes across the distance. She didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. I turned back to my spreadsheet, highlighting specific entries, calculating interest that could have been earned, opportunity costs of capital, deployed without return. When I looked up again, David had joined her at the window, standing together, silhouettes against their warm interior, having a conversation I couldn't hear but could imagine. My phone buzzed, a text from David. Should we talk? I read it, considered it, then replied, when you are ready to talk for real, you know where to find me. I watched him read the message through the window, saw him show it to Grace, saw her reaction, shoulders tensing, shaking her head emphatically. The night deepened, their lights stayed on. Mine too. I organized files, prepped documents, laid the groundwork for the conversations that would come, because they would come. Curiosity and confusion would drive them eventually, but I would set the terms. I would control the timing. Around 9, I stood and stretched, walked to the window, placed my hand on the frame, looked directly across at their house. Grace was there again watching. Our gazes met through darkness and distance. I wondered what she was thinking, what theories she was constructing about my motives, my plans, my purpose in positioning myself so deliberately in front of her home. Let them wonder, let them worry. I turned back to my desk, opened another folder. Tomorrow the next phase would begin. Tonight I would let my presence settle into their consciousness, an unavoidable reality, a question mark they couldn't erase. The house was quiet around me. My house, my position, my strategy unfolding exactly as planned. Through the window I could see her silhouette in their window. She was watching me, and I was watching her. I pulled out my legal pad, began writing notes for tomorrow. The real work was just beginning. 2 weeks passed. I settled into my new routine. Morning started with coffee at my desk, the window framing my view of the neighborhood waking up, checking emails, reviewing investment portfolios, consulting on financial planning projects I had taken on remotely, professional work that kept my mind sharp and my schedule full. In the afternoons I tended my lawn, pruned the hedges, swept the driveway, waved to neighbors walking dogs. Mr. Pacheco, 3 doors down, introduced himself, welcomed me to the street. I thanked him, mentioned I had family nearby, kept the conversation brief and pleasant. I became ordinary, just another resident. Nothing threatening about a 67-year-old man tending his roses. Across the street I watched their patterns. Grace leaving for work every morning at 7:45, David departing 15 minutes later. Grace's parents moving around inside, visible through windows, making themselves comfortable in a home that wasn't theirs. One Tuesday afternoon, I watched the mail carrier cross to their house, saw David answer the door, sign for a certified letter. He opened it standing in the doorway, casual at first. Then his body went rigid. I expected that reaction. 20 minutes later, through my window, I saw David at his kitchen table, holding the letter with both hands, reading it again. Grace appeared, took it from him. Even from 30 yards away, I could see her expression shift. Confusion, then fury. Robert Cole had done excellent work. The letter was precise, Professional. Devastating. A formal demand for repayment of $180,000, documented as a loan with supporting evidence from my personal bank records, where I had noted the payment as loan to son to be repaid. State law recognized verbal loan agreements when backed by documentary evidence. I had kept meticulous records, emails where David had mentioned paying you back eventually, my own contemporaneous notes on the transaction, bank memos I had written to myself for tax purposes, thin evidence maybe, but enough to file a legitimate lawsuit, and most importantly enough to create expensive problems. They consulted a lawyer the next day. I learned this later from David. $300 an hour to hear that I had grounds for a claim. Not solid grounds, his lawyer explained, but enough to require a defense. $15,000 to $25,000 in legal fees to fight a case they might win. 2 days after the letter arrived, I saw them cross the street to my house. I had been expecting this. I had coffee ready, actually. French press on the kitchen counter. Mugs set out. The doorbell rang. I opened it calmly. David. Grace. I stepped aside. Come in. They entered uncertainly. Grace's eyes scanning my living room like cataloging evidence. The furniture was minimal but quality. Leather sofa. Reading chair. Oak coffee table. Clean lines. Organized. Professional. Please sit, I gestured to the sofa. Coffee. We are not here for coffee. Grace remained standing. We are here to talk about that ridiculous letter. I poured 3 mugs anyway, carried them to the coffee table, sat in the armchair facing them. I'm happy to talk, though anything substantial should go through my lawyer. Dad, please. David leaned forward, hands clasped. Can we settle this? We can figure this out as a family. Of course we can settle this. I added cream to my coffee, stirred slowly. My lawyer's contact info is in the letter. He will be happy to discuss terms. Grace slapped the coffee table with her palm. We are your family, Arthur. I looked her steady in the eye. You are. Silence stretched. David picked up his coffee mug, set it down without drinking. Grace's face flushed, jaw tight. Do you actually think you will get that money? Her voice was sharp, but I heard something underneath. Uncertainty. The law will decide. I took a sip of my coffee. I am not worried about the outcome. I documented everything carefully. But legal processes take time, expensive time. The implications settled between us like a third presence. Even if they won, the costs would devastate them. Their savings, modest at best, would evaporate in attorney fees. And I could sustain a legal battle indefinitely. This is insane. Grace stood up abruptly. You are suing your own son for money you gave us years ago. Money I loaned. I remained seated calm, with the understanding it would be repaid. My records are clear. Your records, she spat the words. You planned this, sitting in our house all those years planning. I didn't respond. Let her anger fill the space. David stood too, touched her arm. Grace, let's go. No. She pulled away from him. Your father has lost his mind. This is harassment. It is a legitimate legal claim. I stood now, moved toward the door. If you feel it is harassment, your lawyer can address that in court. Along with everything else, David turned to me at the door, his face pale. Dad, why are you doing this? I looked at my son, saw the confusion there, the hurt, the question that didn't understand its own answer yet. You asked me to leave my home, I said quietly. I did. Now I am looking after my own interests. Talk to my lawyer, David. I opened the door. They left. Grace storming out ahead. David following, shoulders slumped. I closed the door softly but firmly. Returned to my office. Sat at my desk. Watched them cross the street back to their house. Through the window I could see Grace gesturing sharply. David's shoulders hunched further. I opened a file folder on my desk, labeled in my neat script. Phase 2. The legal pressure would build, slowly accumulating, like compound interest. But there were other levers to pull, other adjustments to make. I had given them everything freely for years. It was time to see how they managed without it. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Please don't do this. I read it twice, placed the phone face down on the desk. Through the window their house glowed with interior light against the approaching night. I could see shadows moving inside. The daily routine of a family under pressure they didn't fully understand yet. The lawsuit was theater, important theater, but theater nonetheless. The real work was subtler, more comprehensive. I opened my banking app on my laptop, navigated to scheduled transfers, found the monthly payment to David, $1,200 set to process automatically on the first of every month for the last 36 months. My finger hovered over the delete button. $43,200 I had given them this way, just to help with expenses, David had said when we set it up. Groceries, utilities, insurance, the little costs that added up. They had stopped thinking of it as help, started treating it as expected, part of the landscape of their finances. Invisible as air. I clicked delete. Confirmed cancellation. The screen refreshed. No scheduled transfers. I closed the laptop and looked across the street again. Lights were on in every room now. Grace's parents visible in the living room, settled comfortably on the sofa. David and Grace in the kitchen, still talking, arguing. By their body language, a family under siege, starting to feel the walls closing in. I picked up my coffee mug, still warm. The night stretched ahead, quiet and methodical. Tomorrow they would start noticing the other changes, the missing support they had taken for granted, the financial voids that had been filled invisibly for years. Let them count the costs. Let them do the math. Justice required patience and precision. May 1st came. I watched my banking app confirm what I already knew. No transfer to David's account. The scheduled payment I had maintained for 36 months simply didn't process. Across the street I imagined David at his kitchen table, surrounded by bills, calculator in hand, trying to make numbers work. Numbers that suddenly refused to balance. I didn't have to imagine for long. 3 days later at dusk I saw David moving through his house with visible tension. He spoke to Charles in the living room, a conversation that looked tentative, careful. Charles's response was expansive, dismissive. Linda joined them, animated, comfortable. Grace's parents had been there 4 months now. Their week or two had stretched into a permanent occupation. 2 extra mouths to feed. Utilities rising. Water usage doubled. Grace's parents settling into my old room like they had bought shares in the property. What had been inconvenient was becoming impossible. A week later I saw Grace in their driveway, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in tight circles. Even from my office window I could read the anger in her movements. Sharp gestures, rigid posture. She ended the call abruptly, stood for a moment looking at her phone, then threw it against the garage door. I found out later, much later, what had happened. A declined credit card at a restaurant. Grace had met a colleague for lunch, pulled out her wallet to pay, and watched the cashier swipe twice before apologizing quietly. Limit reached. The public humiliation. She had called David in tears. Tears that turned to rage. "Your father cut us off." The tap, she had screamed. "Did you know he sent money every month? Now it has stopped." The bills that had always been manageable suddenly weren't. $1,200 monthly. A number that seemed modest in isolation created a vacuum they felt immediately. Groceries bought on credit, gas purchases deferred, small luxuries eliminated, and on top of it legal fees. The consultation had cost $900. A retainer would require $15,000. Money they didn't have. Money I had effectively removed from their equation. A Thursday evening in late May, I saw David cross the street to my house. I had expected this eventually. I had coffee ready, same French press, same careful preparation. The doorbell rang. "David," I opened the door. "Come in." He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, the weight of multiple pressures visible in his stance. I led him to the living room, gestured to the sofa, poured coffee into the mugs I had set out. He accepted his with both hands, like he needed the warmth. "Dad, we are drowning." His voice was low, tight. "The lawsuit stuff. The bills. Can we work something out? Maybe I can pay you back over time." I sat opposite him, my own mug warming my palms. "David, I am 67. I have maybe 20 good years left. If I am lucky. I know. But I spent 40 years building security, saving, investing, planning for retirement, for Emily and me, then just for me. After she passed, I set my mug down carefully. I can no longer give it away, but we are family." The desperation in his voice was raw, unfiltered. Yes, and families should treat each other with respect. I looked him directly in the eye. when I needed a place to live. Your wife gave me an ultimatum. Pack my things or give up my room. Do you remember? He looked away. I remember. You said nothing. You did nothing. You watched me pack and leave. I am sorry. His voice cracked slightly. I should have stood up to her. I know that now. Yes. You should have. I leaned back in my chair. Now I am doing what I should have done years ago. Taking care of myself. Protecting what I built. Ensuring I am secure for whatever time I have left. Please. He set his coffee down. Leaned forward, hands clasped. There has to be something we can do. Some way to fix this. Talk to my lawyer about a payment plan. Robert Cole has my full authority to negotiate terms. I kept my voice level. Not cruel, but absolutely firm. I cannot help you beyond that. You mean you won't? I mean I can't. I stood up, moved to the window, looked across, at his house, at the life I had funded, the security I had provided, the family that had discarded me. I gave you everything freely, David. The house payment when you were losing it, her wedding, Grace's car, monthly money for years. I never asked for anything back, never demanded gratitude. I turned to face him. I only asked for respect, for a place in my son's house. And when that became inconvenient, I was disposable. He stood up too, hands hanging by his sides. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. We stood in my living room, 10 feet apart, the distance between us more than physical. Your wife's parents have been living in your house for 4 months, I said, in the room that was mine. Do you charge them rent? Do you ask them to contribute to groceries? Do you demand they give up their space for someone else's convenience? He didn't answer. No, because they are family. Because family helps family. I walked to the door, opened it. I was family too, David. Until I stopped being useful. He moved to the doorway. Stopped. I do not know how to fix this. Figure out what you value, what you are willing to fight for, who deserves your loyalty. I kept my hand on the door. When you know those answers, maybe we can talk again. Until then, talk to my lawyer. He walked out slowly. I watched him cross the street, hands in pockets, head down, shoulders carrying weight he had avoided for too long. I closed the door and went back to my office window. Across the street, I saw the curtains move. Shadows shifted behind the glass. Grace meeting him at the door, probably demanding to know what he said, if he had agreed to help. I sat at my desk, my coffee mug still warm from serving David, the physical reminder of our meeting, a father and son separated by consequences neither of us wanted but both of us had created. This was the hardest part, seeing them struggle, knowing I was the instrument of that struggle. But it was necessary. They had to understand consequences. They had to feel the weight of their choices. They had to recognize that actions create reactions, that disrespect has costs, that people, even family, have limits. I opened my laptop, checked the file labeled Phase 2, notes on next steps, calculations of pressure points, timeline for continued strategy. Through the window, their house lights glowed against the darkening night. I could see movement inside, figures passing through rooms, the choreography of a family in crisis. 4 months ago, I had sat in that house at their dining table, been given an ultimatum, packed my belongings, and left with quiet dignity. Now I sat in my own house in a room designed to watch them, executing a plan built on patience and precision and the recognition that justice sometimes requires inflicting pain. I took a sip of coffee, lukewarm now, but still drinkable. Tomorrow the pressure would continue. The bills would keep coming. The legal threat would keep looming. Grace's parents would keep occupying space and consuming resources. And I would keep sitting here watching, waiting, ensuring they felt every ounce of what they had done. Sad justice, that is what this was. Not triumph, not victory. Just the necessary correction of an imbalance that had stood unanswered for too long. July brought heat and pressure. I watched both accumulate across the street. The first visible crack appeared a Thursday morning. I was sitting at my desk checking emails when I saw David at his kitchen table visible through our 2 windows. He stared at his computer screen for a long moment, then picked up his phone, typed something, put it down, picked it up again. His body language told the story before I knew the details. Shoulders slumped, hand running through his hair repeatedly, the posture of someone making a choice that hurt. I found out later he had canceled their vacation. A week at the coast they had planned for mid-July. $6,000 already paid in non-refundable deposits. He had stared at the cancellation button. Taken a breath, clicked, watched the confirmation email arrive. That night I saw Grace crying at their kitchen table. David standing beside her, not touching her, just standing in the space between comfort and exhaustion. The car appeared in their driveway 2 days later. Grace's sedan, the newer one. The one with leather seats I had helped them buy years ago. A handmade for sale sign in the window, asking $18,000. Even though the car was worth $22,000, desperation pricing. It sold in 48 hours. I saw the buyer arrive. Test drive it. Come back with cash. I saw Grace hand over the keys with stiff movements, like someone letting go of more than just transportation. She stood in the driveway after the buyer drove off, staring at the empty space where her car had been. Grace's parents were still there. 5 months now since that February dinner. Their presence had evolved from inconvenience to crisis. 2 extra people consuming groceries, utilities, space. 2 extra people contributing nothing but expectations. Mid-July, I watched another scene unfold. David in the living room with Charles and Linda. His gestures were careful, apologetic. Charles stood up abruptly, body language radiating offense. Linda's hand went to her throat. They walked out of the room. Within an hour, they were packing. I saw them loading their car the next morning. Suitcases, boxes, the accumulated possessions of 5 months of occupation. Grace stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, shoulders shaking. David stood in the driveway, expression unreadable, no goodbye hugs, no promises to visit soon. Grace's parents drove off without looking back. Grace turned on David the moment they were gone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the fury. Pointing, gesturing, her mouth moving rapidly. David stood there, taking it until something shifted. His posture straightened. His hands came up, palms out, not defensive but firm. They fought for real then. Voices raised loud enough to carry through windows, walls, through 30 yards to where I sat watching. A lamp fell. I saw the shadow through the curtain. A door slammed. Then silence. Hours passed. Lights came on as evening fell. I saw them in separate rooms. David in the kitchen, Grace upstairs, the physical distance between them visible even from my window. The next afternoon I saw David leave his house and cross the street to mine. His walk was slow, deliberate. He had lost weight, I noticed, his clothes hanging looser, the tension visible in every movement. I opened the door before he knocked. "Dad." His voice was rough, tired. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. Let him in. Led him to the living room where we had sat before. During that other conversation when he had tried to negotiate, bargain, find an easy way out, this time felt different. The energy was different. Something fundamental had changed. He sat on the sofa, leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. He stared at the floor for a long moment before speaking. "Dad, I am sorry." The words came out quiet but clear. "I am so sorry. I shouldn't have let her treat you that way. It was your house. You paid our debt. You helped us constantly. And we kicked you out like you were nothing." I waited. Let him continue. I was weak. He looked at me then, eyes red-rimmed but direct. "I let her control everything. I was afraid of conflict, so I sacrificed you instead. That was wrong." "Yes," I said simply, "it was. Can we fix this?" Hope and despair mixed in his voice. "Is there any way to fix this?" I leaned back in my chair, studied my son, saw genuine regret in his face. Not manipulation, not strategy, just honesty, reached through pain. "Maybe," I said, "but on different terms." He nodded immediately. "Whatever you need, tell me. I will drop the lawsuit," I said. I saw relief flood his expression. "But financial help ends. Permanently. No more monthly transfers. No more emergency funds. No more safety net." "Okay." He didn't hesitate. "You are 38, David. You have a good salary. You are capable. You and Grace can build your life without my money propping it up." "We will." His voice was steady. "We have to. I see that now. There is one more condition." I leaned forward. "Grace needs to apologize. Not to you. To me. Face to face. For how she treated me." His jaw tightened. "I will talk to her. I am not interested in a forced apology that means nothing. But she needs to acknowledge what happened. That is non-negotiable. He was silent for a moment, processing, then nodded slowly. She is hurting right now. We both are. But you are right. She needs to say it. When she is ready to do that. Genuinely ready. We can move forward. Until then, everything stays as it is. David stood up, extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, steady, despite everything. Thank you for not giving up on me, he said. I never did. I just stopped letting you take me for granted. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Dad, I am going to fix this, no matter how long it takes. I hope you do, son. I closed the door after he left, returned to my office window, watched him cross back to his house, shoulders straighter than when he had arrived. He went inside, and through the window I saw Grace appear. They stood facing each other in the kitchen. She shook her head, turned away. He followed her, said something that made her stop. They were still talking when darkness fell and they closed the curtains. I sat at my desk, hand resting on my coffee mug. The conversation had been necessary. The terms were clear. Now it was Grace's move. My son was finally hearing me, finally understanding. But Grace, that would be the real test. The days that followed were quieter. I waited to see if David could deliver on his promise. I returned to my consulting work, reached out to old clients, took on 2 small projects. The work felt good. Purposeful. My office became what I had intended it to be. A professional space, not just an observation post. Late August arrived, a Tuesday morning, warm and clear. I was reviewing financial projections when I saw movement through my window. David and Grace leaving their house together, crossing the street toward mine. His hand was on her elbow, not dragging, but guiding, supporting, insisting. Grace's posture was stiff, arms crossed, jaw set. Every line of her body radiated resistance. They reached my door. I watched through the window as David spoke to her quietly. She shook her head. He said something else. She closed her eyes, took a breath. The doorbell rang. I opened the door. They stood on my porch, David steady, Grace barely holding it together. Dad, David said. Grace has something to say. Grace remained silent, her arms still crossed, defensive. A long moment passed. I could see the internal battle playing out on her face. Pride fighting necessity, anger fighting exhaustion. Then, between clenched teeth, I am sorry for how I treated you. It was wrong. The words were mechanical, forced, but they were present. I accept your apology, I said simply. She looked surprised. That is it. That is it. Come in. I stepped aside. They entered. Grace looking around my house like seeing it for the first time. The clean lines, the organized space, the evidence of a man who had built something substantial without their knowledge or help. We sat in the living room. I picked up my phone from the coffee table. I am calling my lawyer now to drop the lawsuit. You will receive confirmation within the day. David exhaled slowly. Thank you, Dad. I dialed Robert Cole, put the call on speaker. Robert. It is Arthur. I need you to file dismissal papers for David's matter. Today, please. Are you sure? Robert's voice was professional but curious. I am sure. Email me the documents to sign. Done. I will have them filed by end of business. I ended the call. Set the phone down. It is done. Dad, David started. But understand, I continued. My voice firm. Things are different now. I will not provide financial help. Not now, not in the future. Grace's mouth opened. We never asked. Grace. David's hand on her arm, gentle but insistent. No. She stopped, closed her mouth. After a pause, quieter. We understand. Good. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. You are both capable people. You can build your own life. A real life. Based on what you actually earn, not what you can extract from others. David stood too. We can. Visit sometime. In the future. I considered it. Maybe. In time. Let's see how things develop. We walked to the door. David paused there, emotion crossing his face. Dad, I am glad you taught me this, even if it hurt. Some lessons have to hurt to matter. They left. I watched them cross back to their house, walking closer together than when they had arrived. Not holding hands, but side by side. Something small but significant. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, pulled up my email and started typing. Robert, I have been thinking about returning to consulting part-time. Nothing demanding, just a few select clients. I have excellent office space now, and I find I miss the work. Are you still in contact with the Perez account? Regards, Arthur. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Through the window, their house looked peaceful. Evening was approaching, lights coming on one by one. A week passed. I settled into new routines. Consulting projects kept me busy. Morning coffee at my desk became about work, not surveillance. I looked up occasionally, saw their house across the street, then returned to my calculations and projections. That evening, a Tuesday in late August, I sat at my desk as the sun set over the city. The sky turned amber and pink, painting the neighborhood in warm light. Through my window, I could see David and Grace at their kitchen table, talking. No shouting, no dramatic gestures. Just a conversation between two people figuring out how to build something real. They looked smaller without my money propping them up, more vulnerable, more human, but they were still there, still together, still trying. I had given them $250,000 over the years, given freely without demanding recognition or respect. And when I needed something simple, a room to live in, basic courtesy, they discarded me like inconvenient furniture. So I had shown them what their comfort really cost, made them feel the weight of every dollar they had taken for granted, forced them to choose between pride and survival, and they had chosen survival. Chosen growth, however, reluctantly. Grace's apology hadn't been warm, but it had been spoken, acknowledged. That mattered more than warmth. Recognition mattered more than reconciliation. David had found his voice, finally learned to stand up to his wife, to take responsibility for his choices, to understand that weakness has consequences. They would be okay. Financially tight, certainly. Humbled, absolutely. But okay. And me, I had my dignity back, my self-respect, my boundaries established and enforced. Justice wasn't about their destruction. It was about my restoration. I turned back to my laptop. An email had arrived from Robert. Arthur. The Perez account is active and asking for you. Let's set up a call. Welcome back. I smiled, typed a reply confirming a meeting for next week. The evening sky darkened to purple, then navy blue. Across the street, their lights glowed warm against the night. Inside my office, my own light reflected in the window, creating a double image. My desk, my space, my future superimposed over their house. I lifted my coffee mug to my lips. The liquid was still warm, still good. Tomorrow I would start the Perez project. Next week I would call another old client. The work would grow gradually at my own pace, on my own terms. I had spent 6 months teaching a lesson about respect and boundaries, about the difference between kindness and weakness, about consequences. The lesson was learned. The account was settled. I was 67. I had maybe 20 good years left. And I would spend them with dignity, intact boundaries set, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. I set down my coffee cup and returned to my work. Outside, the neighborhood settled into nightly routines. Inside, I was exactly where I needed to be. Home, independent, restored. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.